Sarah's lungs burned as she sprinted through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul, her heels clicking frantically against the wet pavement. Behind her, two men shouted in Korean, their voices cutting through the thunder rumbling overhead. She didn't understand their words, but she understood their intent. They'd been following her for weeks, watching from shadows, leaving notes on her apartment door, slashing her tires. Tonight, they'd gotten too close. She rounded a corner, nearly slipping on the slick ground, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Neon signs blurred past her vision in streaks of red and blue. A taxi sped by, splashing water onto her already soaked dress. She screamed for help, but her voice disappeared into the storm. Seoul's busy streets had suddenly become a maze of indifference, every face turning away, every door locked. The footsteps behind her grew closer. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed to hide. Now, a dark doorway materialized to her left, partially concealed by shadows. Without thinking, Sarah threw herself toward it, shoving the door open with both hands. The smell of cigarette smoke and expensive whiskey hit her immediately. She stumbled inside, gasping for breath, and the door slammed shut behind her with a heavy thud. Silence fell like a guillotine. Every single person in the bar turned to stare at her. Sarah froze, water dripping from her hair onto the polished floor. The men in this place weren't like the crowds outside. They wore expensive suits, their faces hardened by violence and secrets. Tattoos crawled up necks and across knuckles. Guns bulged beneath jacket lapels. This wasn't a bar. This was a den of predators. And she just walked straight into it. Her eyes darted around frantically, searching for another exit, but there was none. The door behind her rattled. Her stalkers were right outside. Terror made her reckless. Her gaze landed on a man sitting alone in the corner booth, surrounded by an invisible perimeter of respect that even the other dangerous men in the room seemed to acknowledge. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair swept back perfectly despite the late hour. Tattoos curved up his neck like smoke, disappearing beneath his collar. He held a glass of whiskey, swirling it slowly, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Sarah's feet moved before her brain could catch up. She crossed the room in 5 quick steps, her desperation overriding every survival instinct screaming at her to run. She reached his table, planted her hands on the smooth surface, and leaned down. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please just play along." Then she grabbed his face with both hands and kissed him. The entire bar went dead silent. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the floor like breaking ice. Sarah felt the man beneath her lips go completely still, his body tensing with deadly precision. She could feel the shocked stares burning into her back, could sense guns being readied, could practically hear the collective intake of breath from every gangster in the room. But she didn't pull away. Not yet. Not while her stalkers might still be watching through the window. The kiss lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. His lips were cold and tasted like expensive whiskey and danger. When she finally pulled back, her hands still trembling against his jaw, his dark eyes opened and locked onto hers. They were the kind of eyes that had seen death up close and hadn't blinked. The kind that could strip away every defense and see straight into someone's soul. "If you're going to kiss me," he said softly, his voice carrying a slight accent that made each word sound like a threat wrapped in silk, "you'd better mean it." Sarah's breath caught. She released his face and stepped back, nearly stumbling over her own feet. I'm sorry. There were men chasing me, and I just needed." He raised one hand, silencing her. His movements were economical, controlled, the gestures of someone who never wasted energy. He turned his head slightly, addressing someone behind her without taking his eyes off her face. "Check the door." One of his men moved immediately, slipping outside. The tension in the room remained thick enough to choke on. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look, soaked to the bone, makeup running, desperation written across every feature. The man who'd gone outside returned within seconds. "2 men, boss." They saw her come in, saw the kiss, and left. Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely her knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you so much. I'll just go now and—" "Sit down." It wasn't a request. The man gestured to the seat across from him with 2 fingers. Sarah hesitated, but the weight of his stare made it clear she didn't have a choice. She slid into the booth, perching on the edge, ready to bolt at the first opportunity. He studied her for a long moment, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. "You just kissed Kang Jae-Hyun," he said finally. "Do you have any idea what that means?" The name meant nothing to her, but the way everyone in the bar had reacted told her everything she needed to know. She'd kissed someone important, someone dangerous, someone who could end her life with a snap of his fingers. "I didn't know who you were," she said quietly, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I was desperate. Those men have been following me for weeks. Tonight they got too close, and I panicked. I'm sorry for involving you." "Who are you?" "Sarah Blake. I'm a fashion designer. I moved here from New York 6 months ago for a job with Lumiere Fashion House." Jae-Hyun's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Interest, maybe. Or calculation. And the men following you? I don't know who they are. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but then the notes started appearing on my door. Then my tires were slashed. Tonight they tried to corner me after work." He set his glass down with a soft click. "You went to the police?" "They said there wasn't enough evidence to do anything." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. "I've been trying to handle it on my own, but tonight you kissed a Mafia boss to save yourself." He leaned back, and the ghost of a smile touched his lips. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who just found interesting prey. Bold. Stupid, but bold. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I said I was sorry. Can I go now? No one's stopping you." He gestured toward the door with an open hand. "But those men are probably still out there, watching, waiting. And now they've seen you with me. That changes things." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Jae-Hyun stood as well, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. He was taller than she'd realized, at least 6 feet, his presence commanding despite the quiet way he moved. "It means you're under my protection now, whether you want to be or not." "I don't need protection from a criminal," Sarah said, but her voice wavered. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You kissed me in a room full of my men. In my world, that means something. It means you're mine to protect." His hand reached out, his fingers catching a strand of her wet hair and pushing it behind her ear. The gesture was almost gentle, but his eyes remained cold. "And I always protect what's mine." Before she could respond, he stepped past her, his men falling into formation around him. At the door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "Go home, Sarah Blake. My men will make sure you get there safely. We'll talk again soon." Then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night like smoke. Sarah stood frozen in the empty bar, her heart still racing, her lips still tingling from a kiss that had changed everything. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Sarah's apartment window, harsh and unforgiving. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night on an endless loop. The chase, the bar, the kiss, those dark eyes studying her like she was a puzzle to be solved. She'd kissed a Mafia boss, an actual Mafia boss. The thought made her want to laugh and scream simultaneously. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. Her hand hesitated over it before she finally picked it up. The message was simple. "You shouldn't have run into that bar last night, Miss Blake. He's watching you now. Asterisk asterisk." The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. Sarah rushed to the window and yanked the curtain aside. Across the street, a black car sat parked at the curb, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. But she didn't need to see to know someone was in there. Watching. Waiting. Her phone buzzed again. "Nice dress, by the way." She looked down at herself. She was wearing her pajamas, but yesterday she'd worn a red dress to the fashion show. Whoever was texting her had been watching her yesterday too. Before everything happened. Sarah's hands shook as she typed back. "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who knows you better than you think. Tell the Viper he can't have you. You're already taken. Asterisk asterisk." The Viper. That must be Jae-Hyun's nickname. But taken? Taken by who? She didn't text back. Instead, she threw on clothes and headed to work, telling herself that daylight meant safety, that surrounded by people at the fashion house she'd be fine. She was wrong. Throughout the day, she felt eyes on her constantly. Every time she turned around, she caught glimpses of men in black suits standing at corners, sitting in coffee shops, following at a distance. Jae-Hyun's men, she realized. He meant what he said about protection. But protection felt a lot like surveillance. At lunch, she tried to slip out the back exit of the building, desperate for space to think. She made it 3 blocks before a sleek black car pulled up beside her, the passenger window rolling down smoothly. Jae-Hyun sat in the driver's seat, sunglasses hiding his eyes, one hand draped casually over the steering wheel. Get in. I'm not getting in a car with you. Those men who followed you last night. They're back. 2 blocks behind you. So either get in the car, or wait for them to catch up. Your choice. Sarah spun around. Sure enough, 2 figures in baseball caps were walking toward her with determined strides, their faces obscured but their body language aggressive. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Without another word, she yanked open the passenger door and climbed in. Jae-Hyun pulled away from the curb before she'd even closed the door, driving with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The car smelled like leather and his cologne, something expensive and dark. Why are you doing this? Sarah finally asked, breaking the silence. You don't know me. That kiss was an accident. You don't owe me anything. I told you last night. You're under my protection now. I don't want to be under anyone's protection. I want my life back. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable behind the sunglasses. Your life changed the moment you walked into my bar. You can't go back. So what? I'm just supposed to accept that a mafia boss owns me now. I don't own you. He turned down a side street, checking the rearview mirror constantly. But I am responsible for you. There's a difference. I don't see one. Then you're not looking hard enough. He pulled the car into an underground parking garage, the sudden darkness making Sarah's eyes struggle to adjust. When he finally parked and turned off the engine, he removed his sunglasses and looked at her directly. Those men following you aren't random stalkers. They're professionals. Someone hired them. Someone with resources and patience. Sarah's blood ran cold. How do you know? Because I had my men look into it after last night. He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. 2 men, the same ones who'd chased her, standing outside her apartment building 3 weeks ago. They've been surveilling you for almost a month. Professional gear, rotating shifts, coordinated movements. This isn't some obsessed ex or random criminal. Someone wants you specifically. But why? I'm nobody. I'm just a designer. That's what we're going to find out. Jae-Hyun pocketed his phone. Until then, you stay close to me. Absolutely not. It wasn't a request. Sarah's temper, already frayed by fear and exhaustion, finally snapped. You can't just order me around. I don't care who you are or how powerful you think you are. I'm not some toy for you to play with because I kissed you one time. Something dangerous flashed across his face. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You think I'm playing? Those men out there will hurt you, Sarah. They'll do worse than hurt you. And when they're done, they'll dispose of you like trash. Is that what you want? No, she whispered, hating how her voice shook. But I don't want to belong to you either. Then think of it as a business arrangement. I keep you alive. You cooperate. Simple. Nothing about this is simple. He studied her face for a long moment, then unexpectedly smiled. It transformed his features, making him look almost human instead of the cold predator she'd seen last night. No, I suppose it's not. That evening, he brought her to a penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Seoul's glittering skyline, but Sarah barely noticed. She was too busy processing the reality of her situation. You'll stay here until we figure out who's targeting you, Jae-Hyun said, pouring himself a drink at the bar. My men will be posted outside. Don't try to leave without telling me first. This is kidnapping. This is protection. There's a difference. You keep saying that, but I'm starting to think you just like being in control. He turned to face her, drink in hand, his expression unreadable. I am in control. Of this city, of my organization, of my life. That's how I've survived. But you, he took a step closer. You're chaos. You walked into my world without permission, kissed me without warning, and now you're challenging me when everyone else knows better. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Maybe I'm both. That made him laugh, a genuine sound that surprised them both. Maybe you are. Over the next few days, a strange routine developed. Jae-Hyun would leave early in the morning for what Sarah assumed were mafia business activities he didn't share, though she could guess from the phone calls she overheard. Shipments, territories, problems that needed solving. His men rotated guard shifts outside the penthouse. Sarah tried to work on her designs, but concentration was impossible. What surprised her most was that Jae-Hyun never touched her again, never made any advances. He was coldly polite, maintaining a careful distance that somehow felt more intimate than if he'd tried something. She caught him watching her sometimes, his dark eyes intense, but he always looked away when she noticed. On the fourth night, she couldn't take the silence anymore. She found him on the balcony, smoking a cigarette and staring out at the city lights. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. He didn't turn around. "You're going to anyway. Why did you really let me go that first night? You could have stopped me, questioned me, done whatever it is people like you do. But you let me walk out." Jae-Hyun took a long drag of his cigarette, the tip glowing orange in the darkness. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because you looked at me like I was human. Not a monster, not a boss, not the Viper. Just a man. No one's looked at me like that in a very long time." Sarah moved to stand beside him at the railing, maintaining a respectful distance. "You are human. You're just a human who's done terrible things. Is there a difference?" "I think so. I hope so." He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "You should hope I'm a monster, Sarah. Monsters are predictable. Humans are dangerous." Before she could respond, his phone rang. He answered it in rapid Korean, his body language shifting immediately from relaxed to alert. When he hung up, his face had gone completely blank. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "They found us." Sarah's heart stopped. "How? Does it matter?" He grabbed her arm, not roughly but urgently, pulling her back inside. "We have 60 seconds before they breach the building." They made it to the private elevator before the shooting started. Sarah screamed as bullets shattered the penthouse windows, glass exploding inward like deadly rain. Jae-Hyun shoved her into the elevator and hit the button for the parking garage, his other hand pulling a gun from beneath his jacket. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice completely calm despite the chaos erupting around them. The elevator descended with agonizing slowness. Sarah could hear shouting above them. More gunfire, the sounds of Jae-Hyun's men fighting back. Her entire body shook with adrenaline and terror. When the doors opened, Jae-Hyun moved like liquid death. 3 men in tactical gear were waiting in the garage. He shot the first one before they could react, dropped to one knee to avoid return fire, and took out the second with a shot to the chest. The third managed to get off a round that sparked off the concrete beside Sarah's head before Jae-Hyun put him down. "Move." He grabbed her hand and ran, pulling her toward a black motorcycle parked near the exit. "I don't know how to ride that." "You don't have to." He threw his leg over the bike and started the engine in one smooth motion, then pulled her on behind him. "Hold on tight, and don't let go no matter what happens." Sarah barely had time to wrap her arms around his waist before he gunned the engine. They exploded out of the garage into the Seoul night, tires screaming against asphalt. Behind them, black SUVs burst out of the building in pursuit. The chase that followed was something out of a nightmare. Jae-Hyun drove like a demon, weaving between cars, cutting through alleys barely wide enough for the motorcycle, taking turns at speeds that had Sarah pressing her face against his back and praying. Bullets whined past them. A side mirror exploded. She held onto him so tightly she could feel his heartbeat through his jacket, steady and strong despite the chaos. He took a sudden sharp turn into an underground tunnel, the pursuing vehicle's headlights falling away behind them. He didn't slow down, navigating through the maze of tunnels with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of Seoul's underbelly. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he pulled into an abandoned warehouse and killed the engine. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Sarah's ears rang from the gunfire and the wind. Her hands ached from gripping him so hard. She could feel him breathing hard now, the first sign of exertion she'd seen from him. "Are you hurt?" he asked without turning around. She did a quick mental inventory. Terrified, shaking, probably traumatized, but physically intact. "No. You." "I'm fine." He finally looked back at her over his shoulder. "You can let go now." Sarah realized she was still clinging to him and quickly released her grip, climbing off the motorcycle on unsteady legs. "What the hell just happened? Someone wants you dead badly enough to attack my home." Jae-Hyun's jaw clenched, anger radiating off him in waves. "That means this is bigger than I thought." "Bigger how?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages with a dark expression. "Those weren't random hired guns. That was a coordinated assault by people with military training and serious resources. Someone powerful is after you, Sarah. But I don't know anyone powerful. I'm just a designer. Then there's something you're not telling me, or something you don't know you know. He looked up from his phone, his eyes intense. Think. Is there anything unusual about your past? Anything strange that happened before you came to Seoul? Sarah's mind raced, sorting through memories. Nothing. I grew up in Chicago, studied fashion in New York, worked for a few small brands before getting the offer from Lumiere. My life has been completely ordinary. What about your family? My mom's a nurse. My dad died when I was 10. Car accident. I have a younger brother in college. That's it. Jae-Hyun's expression shifted slightly. How did your father die exactly? I told you. Car accident. Be specific. Something in his tone made her uncomfortable. He was driving home from work late one night. Another car ran him off the road. The other driver was never found. Why? Because that doesn't sound like an accident. He started typing on his phone rapidly. What was your father's name? Marcus Blake. But he was just an accountant. He did taxes for small businesses. What are you thinking? Jae-Hyun didn't answer immediately, too focused on whatever he was reading on his screen. When he finally looked up, his face was grim. Your father wasn't just an accountant, Sarah. Marcus Blake was a forensic accountant who worked with the FBI. He testified in 3 major cases against organized crime families before his death. The warehouse seemed to tilt sideways. That's impossible. My mom never said anything about that. Probably because she was trying to protect you. Witness protection, maybe, or just keeping quiet and hoping the past stayed buried. He showed her his phone screen. It displayed a news article from 15 years ago. FBI witness killed in suspected retaliation. Sarah's vision swam. She stumbled backward, and Jae-Hyun caught her elbow to steady her. This doesn't make sense. That was 15 years ago. Why would someone come after me now? Because someone recently found out who you really are. His grip on her arm tightened slightly, protective rather than restraining. And they want to finish what they started with your father. Tears burned Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. So what do I do? You let me protect you until I can find out who's behind this and end them. His voice was cold, matter of fact, the voice of a man who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. And you trust me? Trust a mafia boss? Trust the man who just saved your life? He released her arm and stepped back. I'm not a good person, Sarah. I've done things that would horrify you. But I don't hurt innocent people, and I don't break my promises. I promise to protect you. I will. She looked at him standing there in his expensive suit now torn and dusty, his hair disheveled, blood on his knuckles, and saw something she hadn't seen before. Not just danger, but determination. Not just power, but purpose. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. Something in his expression softened. He reached out and touched her face gently, his thumb brushing away a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Good. Because things are about to get a lot more dangerous. His phone rang again. He answered it, listened for a moment, then cursed in Korean. They found my warehouse. We need to move again. But before they could reach the motorcycle, the warehouse doors burst open. Men in tactical gear flooded in from both sides, at least a dozen of them, weapons raised and trained on Jae-Hyun. He pushed Sarah behind him immediately, his own gun coming up. But even he couldn't take on these odds. A man stepped through the entrance, different from the others. Older, dressed in a business suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He smiled when he saw Sarah, and it was the coldest smile she'd ever witnessed. Hello, Ms. Blake, he said in perfect English with a slight southern accent. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Jae-Hyun's voice was deadly quiet. Who are you? My name is Richard Cole, though you might know me better by my former associates. He gestured around at his men. I had the unfortunate pleasure of having my entire operation destroyed by Marcus Blake's testimony 15 years ago. Spent 10 years in federal prison because of him. I've spent the 5 years since getting out rebuilding my empire and searching for his daughter. His eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. And here you are, practically gift-wrapped. You killed my father, Sarah said, her voice shaking with rage rather than fear. I did. And now I'm going to kill you. But not before I make you suffer the way I suffered. The way my family suffered. An eye for an eye, as they say. Jae-Hyun's gun didn't waver. You'll have to go through me first. Cole laughed. Oh, I intend to. Killing the Great Viper will be a bonus. 2 birds, 1 stone. Then stop talking and try. For a frozen moment, no one moved. Then everything exploded into chaos. Jae-Hyun shot first, dropping two of Cole's men before diving behind a concrete pillar, pulling Sarah with him. Return fire filled the warehouse with deafening noise, bullets sparking off metal and shattering concrete. Sarah's ears rang painfully. "Stay down," Jae-Hyun shouted over the gunfire. He leaned out and fired several more shots with mechanical precision. But they were impossibly outnumbered. For every man Jae-Hyun took down, two more seemed to appear. Sarah could see the calculation in his eyes, the realization that this might be unwinnable. Then the warehouse's back entrance exploded inward. New gunfire erupted from behind Cole's men, catching them in a crossfire. Sarah glimpsed figures in dark suits pouring in. Jae-Hyun's reinforcements had arrived. The tide turned instantly. Cole's men, caught between two forces, began falling back. Cole himself retreated toward the entrance, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," he screamed. "I'll find her again." "No," Jae-Hyun said coldly, raising his gun for a clear shot. "You won't." But before he could pull the trigger, one of Cole's men threw a smoke grenade. Gray clouds billowed through the warehouse, obscuring everything. By the time it cleared, Cole and his surviving men had vanished into the night. Jae-Hyun's second-in-command approached, a lean man with a scar across his cheek. "Boss, are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Secure the perimeter. I want every exit covered. Cole doesn't leave this city alive." "Yes, sir." As his men scattered to follow orders, Jae-Hyun turned back to Sarah. She was shaking uncontrollably now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. Without a word, he pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. "You're safe," he murmured. "I've got you." Sarah clutched at his jacket, tears finally spilling over. She'd held them back through the chase, through the fear, through everything. But now they came in great heaving sobs. She cried for her father, for the childhood stolen by violence, for the danger she'd unknowingly carried with her all these years. Jae-Hyun held her through all of it, silent and steady, his heartbeat strong beneath her ear. When she finally quieted, exhausted and wrung out, he tilted her face up to look at him. "I'm going to end this," he said quietly. "I'm going to find Richard Cole and everyone who helped him, and I'm going to make sure they never threaten you again. Do you understand?" She nodded, too tired to speak. "But I need you to stay with me. Stay close, stay safe, and trust that I know what I'm doing." His thumb brushed across her cheek, wiping away the last of her tears. "Can you do that?" "Yes." Something shifted in his expression, his eyes dropping to her lips for just a moment before returning to meet her gaze. The air between them felt charged, electric with something that had been building since that first desperate kiss in his bar. "Sarah," he said softly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse all at once. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did. But suddenly his mouth was on hers, not cold and passive like that first time, but hot and demanding and alive. She kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his jacket, her body pressed against his. This kiss meant something. It was a promise, a claim, an acknowledgement of everything that had been unspoken between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-Hyun rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he whispered. "Probably," she agreed. "I'm not a good man. I know. I can't promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things you deserve. I'm not asking for those things." He pulled back slightly to study her face. "Then what are you asking for?" Sarah met his eyes steadily. "Just you. However you are. Whatever you are. Just you." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face, transforming him completely. "Then that's what you'll get." He kissed her again, softer this time, gentler, and Sarah felt something inside her chest crack open. She was falling for a mafia boss, a killer, a dangerous man who lived in shadows and violence. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most terrifyingly right thing she'd ever felt. When they finally left the warehouse, driving through Seoul in a convoy of black cars with his men surrounding them, Sarah watched the city lights blur past and thought about how dramatically her life had changed in just a few days. She'd come to Seoul chasing a dream, running from nothing, expecting nothing more than a career and maybe some adventure. Instead, she'd kissed the devil and discovered her own past was darker than she'd ever imagined. She'd found danger and protection in the same man. She'd learned that sometimes the monsters were the ones keeping you safe. And as Jae-Hyun reached over to take her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, she realized she wouldn't change any of it. Not the fear, not the chaos, not even the danger. Because it had led her to him. What happens now? She asked quietly. Jae-Hyun glanced at her, his expression serious but warm. Now? Now we hunt. Cole made a mistake targeting you. He stepped into my world, threatened what's mine, and in my world, that has consequences. Will we find him? Yes. And then, his grip on her hand tightened slightly. And then you'll be free. Free from the past, free from the fear. Free to choose what you want your future to look like. What if I choose you? He smiled, that dangerous, beautiful smile that made her heart skip. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. The convoy pulled up to a new safe house, a traditional Korean hanok hidden in one of Seoul's quieter neighborhoods. As they climbed out of the car, Jae-Hyun pulled her close one more time, his lips brushing against her temple. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow we start planning. Planning what? How to end Richard Cole and everyone who helped him. His voice turned cold, the killer returning. And how to make sure no one ever dares to threaten you again. Sarah nodded, but as she headed inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That her kiss in a desperate moment had started something that would change both their lives forever. And as she lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of Jae-Hyun's men patrolling outside, she thought about destiny and choice, about fear and courage, about how sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is trust someone who shouldn't be trusted. But she did trust him. Against all logic, against all reason, she trusted Kang Jae-Hyun with her life. And maybe, just maybe, with her heart too. If you made it this far, you're part of the story now. Drop a like if you're Team Jae-Hyun, subscribe if you want to see how this dangerous romance ends, and comment below whether Sarah should run or stay. Because the next chapter? It's going to change everything.